Hi, I'm James Hamilton from Stumpy Nubs Woodworking Journal, and today I'm going to help you solve your random orbital sander problems. The random orbital sander gets its name from the motion of the disc on the bottom. Not only does it spin in circles, but it also orbits in a small elliptical motion. This ensures that no part of the abrasive travels in the same path twice during the same rotation. This reduces swirl marks and produces random scratch patterns no matter the direction of the grain. They are marvels of power tool technology, but they can also be frustrating at times. So here are some solutions to common problems you may encounter with your random orbital sander. I know I just said that random orbital sanders reduce swirl marks, but what I meant was the big circular marks that are left by the spinning discs of old rotary sanders. However, random orbital sanders can still leave tiny little swirls behind. They're sometimes called pigtails or spirals. These really stand out, especially when you put on a finish, and definitely if you put on stain. There are several potential causes for these that you need to be aware of. It may be that just a little bit of the abrasive grit from your sandpaper came off and got stuck in a different spot, and so now it's digging deeper in that spot. Or it could be that dust built up and compacted into a teeny little ball, creating some type of lump, and that can also dig deeper as you sand. So the solution is to keep your sandpaper clean by using a sander with good built-in dust collection or by attaching a shop vacuum. If that doesn't solve the problem, you might just get some better sandpaper that won't break up as you use it. Another cause for the spirals is moving your sander around too quickly. Remember, the disc is orbiting in circles. It's going to leave circular scratches. The key is to leave thousands and thousands and thousands of them so that they're closely blended together. If you move the sander side to side too quickly, you stretch those spirals out and you make them more noticeable. Sand slowly. Take about 15 or 20 seconds to travel a foot and then move on to the next area rather than moving quickly back and forth over the same area many times. Finally, don't skimp on your grits. If your 100 grit paper leaves a few spirals, the next grit, 120, is going to take them out. But if you skip from 100 up to 220, you're going to have to sand forever to remove the deeper scratches from the 100, and you're likely to leave some of those spirals behind. We all get impatient when we're sanding, but it's actually faster and more efficient if you use several incremental grits instead of just 2 or 3. This problem is related to the last one, but it's worth going into a little bit deeper. When you sand, especially if you're using a coarse grit, the dust can build up quickly. Some random orbital sanders have reasonably effective built-in dust collection. Others, not so much. If you let the dust build up, you may get swirl marks, as we discussed earlier, but you're definitely going to clog your paper up so that it'll stop working well, and you'll have to sand a lot longer. Clogged paper will also build up heat and dull more quickly. And the heat can even melt the rough surface on the bottom of the sander that holds the paper on. More on that later. The solution to clogged paper is to use a shop vac, especially when you're sanding with coarse grits that create a lot of dust. Check the paper periodically as you work. If it looks clogged, rub it with a rubber stick like this one to clean out the dust and get it back cutting again. I'll put a link to the stick I use in the description below this video. This final random orbital sander problem is one I had recently, and if you've bought a sander in the last few years, you've experienced it too. The Velcro-like material on the bottom of the sander just doesn't hold the paper on very well. Older hook and loop sanders used to hold the discs too well. You had a hard time getting them off, and after you did it like twice, you'd ruin the fuzz on the back. So manufacturers have gone the other way, making pads that hardly stick at all to the bottom of the sanders. The idea is to make it easy to change back and forth between grits. But the problem is the sanding discs can come off while you work, especially if you lift the sander up off the workpiece to move it to another area without turning it off and letting it come to a complete stop. It's a pain in the tuchus. But most of the new name brand sanders have these less aggressive pads on the bottom now. This is a really big problem for me especially because I like to use the Duragrit carbide sanding discs. These things last for years, I love them, but they're made out of steel instead of paper, so they're heavier. And if the sander doesn't grip them well, they can fly off. I was pretty frustrated for a while, but it turned out the solution was right in the package. Somehow I missed that they had included a new, stronger piece of adhesive-backed Velcro that I could put on my sander. So I took my sander with no pad or no disc on the bottom. I set it on top of a sheet of sandpaper and I turned it on to wear the little Velcro nubs off the bottom and get a smooth surface that I could attach my new adhesive-backed Velcro disc to. Now this solved the problem with a new sander that wasn't gripping well. But what if you have an older sander that once did grip well, but it's not anymore? The problem could be simple. It could just be dust buildup. So clean it well and see if that helps. It may also be that you switched sandpaper to a cheaper one, or the sandpaper manufacturer has been cutting costs, and so the fuzz on the back is just no good and it's not going to hold well. So you might have to change your sandpaper. Or it may be that you just wore out the Velcro pad on your sander. This can happen if you apply excessive pressure when you sand, or if you build up a lot of heat that can actually melt those little plastic hooks on the bottom. You may be able to buy a replacement pad for your sander for like 15 or 20 bucks. Or you could go to a craft store and get some adhesive-backed Velcro strips and glue them onto the bottom. Of course, sand off and flatten out, get a smooth surface on your pad first. Better yet, you could buy a carbide sanding disc, which will come with a new Velcro piece that can go on the bottom of your sander, solving that problem and solving the problem of having to throw away all those paper discs all the time. I'll link to these in the description below this video. One last tip to avoid slipping discs. When you store your sander, leave a sanding disc on the bottom. This prevents the Velcro hooks from bending and flattening and losing their grip even more over time. I hope these tips help you get more from your random orbital sander. In a future video, we'll discuss more sanding tips and sandpaper in general. Wait, don't go yet. If you're new here, please subscribe and remember to ring the bell. I would really appreciate that. Give us a thumbs up, or better yet, leave us a comment. I always read them. And be sure to check out the latest issue of Stumpy Nubs Woodworking Journal. It's always packed with tips, tricks, and tutorials designed to make you a better woodworker.